Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host, coming to you from Wisconsin. I mean, I knew what state I was in. Oak Creek, that's where I am, Oak Creek. I'm actually at the, excuse me, I'm at the Quick Trip here. I think, well, there's a lot of Quick Trips around here. But I picked this one because I had checked on the app, the Quick Trip app, and it said it was truck friendly and had truck parking. So I don't know exactly what truck friendly means to the folks at Quick Trip. I know what it means to me, but I definitely know what truck parking means. And I can tell you without equivocation, there is no truck parking at this location. What I've done is I've parked so the back of the store is over there, and so I'm just parked along the curb by the grass here. I'm not really in the way at all, but there's a fire hydrant just in front of the truck that I had to wait till a guy that was parked behind me left, and then I backed up a few more feet, so I'm not blocking the hydrant in case the store catches on fire tonight. Also, there's some warehouses around here, so don't want to block the hydrant. Yeah, so I'm on my second load at my new company. Got my truck on Sunday night. There were some things that needed to be taken care of, but I took the truck anyway because I had a load to deliver up in Massachusetts. So I got that delivered. I deadheaded back to the shop, which worked out fine because then I picked this load up in Hazleton, PA, and I'm delivering in the morning to Milwaukee. So I'm like 22 miles from my destination. I didn't really need to run this very hard, so yesterday I was kind of lollygagging. I mean, I was going across 80 in PA, but I was kind of lollygagging because I was like, I don't have to be there till Thursday. But unlike other companies that I know, this company puts a lot of loads on you. So I have 2 Preplans that I got while I was being loaded in Hazleton. So I'm going to drop this in the morning, and then in the evening I have 2 pickups in Chicagoland, and that's going to Buffalo. And then I have a pickup on Saturday morning in Williamson, New York, which is real close to where I grew up. And that's coming out to the Walmart in Tomah, Wisconsin. So, yeah, just running back and forth across, the Ohio Turnpike, the Indiana Toll Road, and so forth. So, no complaints so far. Everybody's been super helpful, super responsive. People pick up the phone. Yeah, so I'm so far so good. One thing I will say that I don't care for, and I was talking about pros and cons of my company. One of the things that really probably is not going to affect me, because I don't think I'm ever going to put B back on the truck, but because she really does like to be home. She likes to be with people, but she really does. She's kind of a homebody, even though she spent a lot of time on trucks. But they have a $750 dog deposit. Now, that's not as high as I've heard of. I think for company drivers at Prime, I think it's $1,000. At least that's what they told me several years ago. They may have changed that. And I was talking about Hirschbach. It's like $2,000 even if you're leasing or you are buying the truck, which is like insane, absolutely insane. But anyway, so that's it's $750. I think that's excessive. because my sense of it is, and you guys could tell me if I'm wrong, but my sense of it is pets do only the amount of damage their owners let them. And if you show me a driver who lets, you know, like their pet crap or pee in the truck and doesn't do anything about it, doesn't take them out, I'm guessing that person doesn't, even despite that, wouldn't take very good care of their truck. So I don't understand the pet deposit thing much, but anyway. Positive thing, of course, this truck goes faster than my old truck. It'll go like 71, 72 miles an hour on level ground, semi-level ground, and but the cruise will go up. It'll like scroll up to 74. The funny thing is, I was like out there driving like, you know, a prime driver, and because, you know, you just get used to driving a certain speed, and I was like, yeah, I'm not in a hurry. But then I realized that with those two pre-plans, I kind of do have to hustle. So today I drove faster than I had been, certainly faster than I've driven maybe ever in a truck. And it was not because I was in a hurry to get this load delivered. It was because I was just trying to save my clock, have more time on my clock. So I think I got about 43 hours to work with. And then I'll start getting recaps next Tuesday. So pretty sure, because that load in Toma delivers on Monday morning, so I should be good to go. But hey, you know, I haven't done any history in a while, and I kind of wanted to do some, but kind of also as a travel log. So I'm going to show you some stuff that I did when I was home for a couple of weeks. So my wife and I went camping on the C&O Canal. And if you're not familiar with the C&O Canal, it runs parallel and right next to the Pomac River. And it was the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal. And there are many canals that were built all over this country in the, you know, late 1700s, early 1800s, to move stuff by barge. And what they would typically do is tow stuff with mules or maybe oxen. They would tow these barges, and these boats these were man-made canals. And the reason, you say, well, why didn't they just, you know, run stuff down the river? And the answer is because they couldn't run the whole river. And the reason is because of altitude drops, but also, like, you know, rock falls and stuff like that, where they could, you know, they had to get around those. It was not navigable the whole way down. The Potomac River is one example of not being navigable from, you know, the headwaters, like way out in western Maryland, all the way down to the Chesapeake. So same thing with the Susquehanna River. It's not navigable all the way down. Like, you can't really get a ship from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, let's say, to Baltimore using the Susquehanna River. So this canal was dug, and today you can still see the canal. Most of it's not flooded anymore, but the tow path is still there. So the animals would walk on a path beside the canal, and they would be yoked or to, you know, like the bow of the boat, and they would pull it. And that was how it was on the Eerie Canal. That was how it was probably on the I&M Canal, the Illinois and Michigan Canal, which connected like the Illinois River to Lake Michigan. So anyway, we were out there camping, and we just happened to be camping at this National Park Service site called Antietam Creek Campground. And so, because I was over in Sharpsburg, Maryland, and environs, I, in addition to riding my wife and I took our tandem out on the towpath. I think we rode like 21 miles. Not a really long ride, but it was nice. And but we also rooted around Sharpsburg and the Antietam battlefield a little bit, and I wanted to show you some of the stuff. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the Newcomer House, and the Newcomer House is a house that was right by Antietam Creek, and in particular, it's right by Antietam Creek at what is called the Middle Bridge. And so take a look at this, and in the background you can still see the bridge. It's not the bridge that was there during the Civil War. It's because it's a regular highway. I think it's Maryland Route 66. But so that bridge has been there since before the Civil War, and it's still there. And the Newcomer House has been there since before the Civil War, before the Battle of Antietam, which was on September 17th, 1862. But you can still see the bridge. It's pretty much in the same place it's always been. Okay, so that's a Newcomer House. And then another place we went that I had never been before was the Pry House, P-R-Y. And the Pry family was fairly affluent. You could kind of tell by looking at the house, and they were, farmers and everything. And the Pry House served as General George McClellan's headquarters. And I took a couple of pictures of Pry House. But one of the things that happened at the Pry House well after the battle, and so to back up, the Pry House, I'll show you this first picture of the Pry House, and then the following picture, I'm going to show you two pictures of the Pry House, and then the following picture is a picture I took from the backyard of the Pry House, which had been used by Union Signal Corpsmen because it actually overlooks the battlefield across the creek. Now, back then, there were probably less trees, because keep in mind that in the 1860s, farmers would cut down pretty much every stinking tree they had on their land, because they would use the wood for building and for fires, and they wanted to maximize the land available for crop space, because crop output wasn't what it is today. But so take a look at these three pictures, but the last picture is looking towards the battlefield, and you can see way, probably like 2-3 miles away, there's a white barn. It's going to be tiny in the picture, but that's the Mama farm, which is right next to the battlefield. Basically, the Mama farm was on the battlefield. So that'll give you an idea of where McClellan's headquarters are, or were. So the other interesting thing about McClellan's headquarters at the Pry House is there's a very famous picture of Abraham Lincoln in his stovepipe hat standing on the right, or excuse me, on the left of a photo and facing General McClellan, who was not a very tall guy. Lincoln was 6'4", and he's facing McClellan. So actually this would have been Lincoln, this would be McClellan if you're looking at it this way. Yeah. And there's some tents, and there's a bunch of the general staff there, and so that's where Lincoln, that was on the grounds of the Pry House. But the other thing that's noteworthy about the Pry House is that during the battle, there was a general, major general by the name of Israel Richardson, and he was directing Union troops along the sunken road. And the Union infantry had already enfiladed the Confederates there and slaughtered them. Well, he was repositioning his guns and he was going to press the attack, and he was struck by an artillery fragment. And here's a picture of Richardson. And by the way, his nickname was Fighting Dick. Now, his name was Israel Bush Richardson, but I think the Dick part came from the Richard part. So, and that was the name. He was a West Point graduate. He'd been in the Army for a number of years, then got out, came back during the Civil War, but he was known as Fighting Dick. So anyway, Richardson he's wounded. He's carried to a field hospital. Now, his wound was not thought to be life-threatening. He just probably got a bad gash. Well, so later on, they move him across the creek to the Pry House. And what's true about any Civil War battlefield is every house that was standing would become a hospital. It would either become a Union hospital or a Confederate hospital, depending on what side of the lines they were on. And what would also happen is that troops who were wounded would be left behind when the Army withdrew. Although the Army didn't go anywhere. The Union Army hung around for like 2 months after the battle. But Richardson is eventually taken to the Pry House, and he is brought into the upstairs of the Pry House. And his mom and his sister, by the way, he was from Vermont. His mom and his sister come to Sharpsburg or Maryland. I don't know if that side of the creek's probably not considered Sharpsburg. It's definitely not in town. His mom and his sister come down to Maryland to tend to him. And that's the other thing that used to happen is if a soldier was wounded and he wanted to receive like good medical care or have somebody really look after him, often it was, parents, siblings, spouses that would come to wherever they had been wounded, because they would have been left behind, and they would come there and take care of the person. Well, Richardson, again, his wound wasn't seen as being life-threatening, but like many soldiers in the Civil War, he would succumb to infection/disease. So he's wounded on September 17th. He eventually gets an infection and perhaps sepsis, but then he also contracts pneumonia, and he dies in the upstairs of the Pry House on November 3rd, 1862. But Lincoln, when he was at the Pry House, did go upstairs to pay his respects, or at least, visit the general. Richardson was a well loved and regarded general, and it didn't matter that you were a 2-star general. Disease would find everybody in the Civil War, and many soldiers succumbed to disease and or infection from wounds. There were a lot of unsanitary conditions in Army hospitals and stuff like that. And I could spend time talking about Clara Barton, but she was the one that founded the U.S. Sanitary Commission, which eventually became the U.S. Red Cross, which was patterned after Florence Nightingale's founding of the International Red Cross. But, surgeons would do stuff that was really dirty, and they, infections and diseases would spread because of crappy medical practices. So that's that. Oh, and one other thing. So we were camping right on the Pomac River. We were actually camping in a little area of land between the tow path and the canal and the river. And I took this picture as the sun was going down. I kind of think it's cool to give you an idea what it looked like. Yeah, so anyway, that's what I've been up to. Oh, another cool thing, if you're into this type of stuff, I have a reefer on my back, and I was filling it up yesterday, and it was about a third of a tank. I'm like, okay, let me fill this thing up. So, I put the nozzle in, and I lock it in place, and it's filling. And I look over, and it's at like 27 gallons, right? I'm like, wait a minute. So I look under the trailer, and I'm like, that's not a 30-gallon tank. I think it's a 50. At least the reefer I have. I don't know if the rest of them are like that, but yeah, I was like, man, that was kind of cool. So it took over $100 worth of fuel to put 2/3 in that to fill it up pretty full. But I don't know if that's because I don't really know why the tanks are so big, but it does mean that you don't have to fill them up so often, so that's another maybe advantage, because I always tried to be efficient about fueling reefers anyway. Like, I would never fuel them unless I was dropping them off somewhere. I wouldn't fuel them until they were at or below a half a tank. Now, I know, some folks are like, oh, well, that's taking a risk. And yeah, that's true. But I have fueled reefers at places where my fuel card didn't even work. And sometimes I would just pay out of pocket because I didn't want to hassle with getting a PO or whatever. So I would simply put I just fuel the reefer with cash, and just go from there. So yeah, there's a lot of things that are kind of on my mind, and I'm still hearing about some crazy stories at Prime with trainees, and I don't want to really focus on problems at Prime, because I was telling somebody I don't really think like trainees that are an issue is really like Prime recruiting bad people. Company recruiters just recruit whoever's qualified, right? But I do think I know of several people, not including myself, that have left Prime because Prime had a trainee that did something untoward, and Prime was like, oh, the trainer's at fault. And a lot of people said to me over the years, well, so there's a couple of different camps, right? There's a couple of different camps. One is, I've had people say, oh, well, your problem is you just train for the money. You shouldn't be training if you don't love to train, just like a teacher. And I'm like, that clearly is somebody who's probably never trained anybody or been a school teacher. Because here's the thing. If I said to you, hey, you live in a 1-bedroom apartment, why don't you let somebody move in so you can teach them what you know? And when you're awake, they're going to sleep in your bed. But I want you to do this just because you love teaching people stuff. I mean, nobody would do that, right? Like, I enjoy teaching people things. I did it a lot in the military. But I also was getting compensated when I was in the military, right? I have a pension that I paid zero money into. I have great medical benefits that I pay almost nothing for. I had, the adulation of, an entire nation of people because I just happened to be in the military, which is a dumb reason to be. You know how I feel about that stuff. But my point is, I wasn't doing it for free. I wasn't doing it because I was patriotic. I was doing it because I got compensated, I enjoyed myself, and there was a huge benefit at the end. And that's the reason people train. Because no one in their right mind is going to do it for free. And anybody who says, oh, I just train because I love training. Okay, fine. But if I said, but we're not going to compensate you for it, you still wouldn't do it. And if you say you would, you're either lying or a moron, right? So it just surprises me how, I mean, there are a number of things that are going on, a number of like really noteworthy changes, and it just surprises me that how little support trainers get when something goes sideways. They're not and Lyle talked about this. Maybe they were given the benefit of the doubt back in the day, a few years ago. But it doesn't seem like it's the case. And I'll talk about that in more depth. And yeah, I'm gonna name some names, and because I just had somebody just quit yesterday. They turned their truck in and terminated their contract. And when I say they terminated their contract, they terminated their contract. They kept getting crap from Prime about something that had happened on their truck with a trainee, and they finally had enough, and they're like, you know what, I think they actually turned around and went back to a terminal after a conversation with their fleet manager. So, and oh, by the way, because I talked to them several times, they are getting job offers today. Like, they weren't even out of, because they dropped their truck at Pittston, and they weren't even out of Pennsylvania, and they had people contacting them about jobs. So I don't, it's like somebody said to me, hey, I think, I'm surprised you got a job so soon. And my response was, I kind of thought it took longer than I expected, but maybe things are slower. I had a number of companies that they kind of just ghosted me, which I guess is pretty common now, where people don't even send you a thanks for playing letter. So it's all good though. You only need to have one job, right? It's like Lyle's trainer used to say, there only needs to be one parking spot. So I got a job, and and let me say this about like first choices and chance and all that stuff. Sometimes things happen that you weren't expecting, and it works out really good. Sometimes not. But I think I feel fortunate that I happened to just apply to a lot of companies, but then I got interest from a couple of companies, and the one that I was like, all right, let me see how this works, seems to be working okay. Now, this is a very small sample size, so stay tuned. But yeah, we're gonna be I'm gonna be talking about some other stuff that I really, I had a long conversation with a couple of guys that I'm friends with yesterday, and I was talking about how a lot of people go through life not really understanding what's actually happening to them in the moment, and in part because ignorance is bliss sometimes, right? I mean, it really is, right? Like if you're getting shortchanged on something, but you don't think you are, and you're happy, then you're happy, right? But I also I'm a big proponent of understanding as much as I can. And when I was in the military, I did a lot of things that I know a lot of people would never in a million years do. They'd be like, I'm not doing that for that amount of money. Because when I was first in the military, as an E3, so I wasn't even the bottom of the totem pole. I was a little bit up the totem pole. I used to get like $223 every 2 weeks or every 15 days. $223 every 15 days. And I was an E3, and that was with no deductions other than like taxes. So, I've worked for peanuts and done stuff over the years that a lot of people wouldn't do. Hell, a lot of people won't do. The Navy was like, 7,000 and I think 7,600 recruits short last fiscal year, and about 1,200 officer accessions short of where they need to be. So obviously people won't do it, and but but the thing is, I knew what I was getting into. I understood what was going on, and I think there's a lot of people in trucking that don't understand. They know when they get held up at a shipper, and that makes them angry, but that's not what's really hurting them financially. That's really obvious. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about what companies that lease do, and I'm not going to talk just about Prime, but I know Prime's lease really well, and I understand a lot of the moving parts, and I'm just going to share my observations. And let me caveat this up front. Let me preface this by saying I don't advocate anybody changing companies if it doesn't make sense for them. I was at Prime for 3 years, and I knew exactly what I was getting, and I still thought that it was a good situation until it wasn't. But I'm not like recruiting for my company, and I'm not like anti-recruiting or whatever you want to say for Prime. Like I've said that certain companies do certain things, and I can back that up, but I don't want anybody to think I'm like down on whoever's left behind. I see that a lot in social media. As soon as somebody, it's like the jilted lover, right? I'm not that guy. I'm like, hey, if you're at any of the companies I've been at before, Knight, Schugel, GP Transco, Prime, and it's working for you, then I'm happy. I'm happy for you. And the company I'm at, if it works for me, hopefully I'll just be here until I really do want to retire. But anyway, stay tuned. I appreciate everybody. I don't ever really spend much time begging for likes or comments or subscribers, but I did note that we just passed 3,400 subscribers. So if you're a new subscriber, thanks. If you're an old subscriber, double thanks. I appreciate you hanging around this long. And anyway, I will talk to you soon. Bye.